Good evening. This is the Village Council Special Public Budget Meeting. The date is April 1st, 2025. The time is 5:03 p.m. Adequate notice of this meeting has been provided by a posting on the bulletin board in Village Hall, by mail to the Ridgewood News, the Record, and by submission to all persons entitled the same as provided by law of a schedule, including the date and time of this meeting. Roll call.
Councilmember Mortimer?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Perrin?
Yes.
Councilmember Weitz is absent. Councilmember Winograd?
Here.
Mayor Vagianos?
Here, will you all please join us in a salute to our flag? Okay, let's go right to public comment. Dylan, I notice we do not have a monitor here, so I can't tell if there's anybody on. Thank you very much. Nobody on hybrid access. No one coming to the mic in the room, so I will close public comment, and we will go to our discussion items. Keith.
Thank you, Mayor. So tonight will be our final budget meeting for 2025. As per the direction of the council, when we last met for our last budget meeting, there were a number of items that the council and the administration were looking to revisit with the various department heads. Through the efforts of each of those department heads who, after that last meeting, were requested to cut back between 5 and 8% of their operating budget. And through the due diligence of Bob Rooney, our Chief Financial Officer, and his staff in the Finance Office, we were able to cut back, make some significant cuts, but none that would directly affect the services that are rendered to the residents here in Ridgewood. So if I can call your attention to the backup that was provided to you, there is a packet that you received. It's entitled Budget Cuts Impacted by Department, Current Fund 2025 Introduced Budget. I'd ask the council to refer to page 9. And we're going to go through each of these as the meeting progresses, but I'm going to sort of take it to the bottom line. On page 9, on the right-hand side, in that center column, it's the cut column. We were able to reduce, in order to get under the appropriations cap, by almost $2 million. You see the numbers: $1,989,415.92. That was the number we needed to get to in order to make sure that we were under the state-imposed appropriations cap. And if you flip to the last page of that packet, you'll see that the total amount that we were able to either reduce or move grant funds over to cover some costs. We've also moved some trust fund money over, and again, we'll detail this momentarily, but that center column there equates to $2,445,834.50. That's the total number that's been able to be removed from the appropriation side to be raised by taxation. Again, some of it were outright cuts, some of it was moving trust money over to cover the costs so that it did not have to be raised by taxation. But I just want to thank each of our department directors and their respective staffs, along with Bob and his staff, for the incredible work they have put in over the last month getting us to this number. We're going to take you through what was cut so that you are aware of how the budget has changed since we last met. And then we will review the bottom line when it comes to the tax levy at the conclusion of that exercise. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Rooney. And again, as we go through this document, starting on page 1, I would just ask the council to pay mind to that center column marked cuts, and he'll explain to you the process we went through to determine what the reductions would be to each of those line items. So Bob, you want to take us through?
Sure. So the first item you see is Village Council. That's an add-on. That's for the SID consultant that was discussed previously that we hadn't anticipated in the original budget. The second is the MIS department. We've cut back $19,000 in contractual services and $4,000 in training. The tax assessment, the reserve that we discussed several meetings ago for tax appeals, we removed from the tax assessor's office.
Which, by the way, just so the council's aware, the appeal deadline was today at 4 o'clock. I received an email just a little while ago from Bill Palumbo, our tax assessor. It looks like we have 15 county appeals. At least 5 of them were already negotiated at the state level and filed with the county to make the process go faster. In comparison, we had double that amount last year at 31. So that's our new tax appeal, our new pending tax appeals would be an additional 15. Go ahead, Bob.
15 appeals or 15,000?
15 appeals that were filed as of today for this next go-around. Now, we have pending appeals from prior years, but this would be the new batch in which the deadline was today. Sorry, Bob, go ahead.
No problem. Next one is village attorney. We took cuts in there for our anticipated reduction for labor attorney, union negotiations, and a conversation I had with Matt Rogers regarding litigation that's outstanding against the village. Engineering, we're reflecting $118,000 that's going to be charged to capital to offset salaries and wages. Not hiring a part-time employee for $40,000 and a reduction of overtime in 20. When I make reference to reductions, we've scrubbed this to go back to what actual time was or costs were put against in the last 2 years against these items and adjusted for January and February purchases to date. So we're comfortable where we are with those numbers. Next one, historic preservation, $500. That's just a general cut. The next one is planning board, looking at the a $6,000 general cut and a cut in planning consultant for $13,000. Next is zoning board adjustment for $5,000, and that's professional services for a zoning consultant.
Wait, Bob, I have planning board 19 as a cut.
Yeah, but that's 13 plus 6.
It's 13
Okay,
plus 6.
Got it.
No problem. Police salaries and wages. Again, all these were discussed with department heads, so some of them may seem large. $70,000 for police salaries and wages, $5,000 representing a reduction in the higher rank, working a higher rank, $25,000 in reduced overtime, $40,000 in reduced compensation time. I also utilized unappropriated grant funds of $26,884, which will be applied against salaries and wages. Later on, you'll see how this is offset. It's just a wash. It's not a reduction in total. Police OE, let's see, we reduced that by $100,600, $5,000 for reduced training, $14,800 for service contract and radios, $800 for an alarm system reduction, $75,000 police vehicle maintenance, $5,000 for the maintenance of equipment, and applying $14,700 for unappropriated grant funds that I had available. Next is OEM. We removed the $15,000 MREs. We actually have money that these would qualify for in capital, that the purchase can be made through this with prior years. $200 reduction in printing, $1,400 maintenance of equipment, $700 supplies, $400 uniforms, $1,400 in certifications, $500 freezer replacement, and $500 for emergency provisions. Next is fire, prorating the start of a new firefighter beginning July 1, an adjustment for the service contract for radios. The next is streets, $25,000 reduction for part-timer, $150,000 which is offset by snow trust, $5,000 which is reduced for purchase of snow equipment, and $5,000 for chemicals. Under fleet, we reduced the overtime by $10,000, reduced lubricants, purchase of tires, and maintenance by a total of $50,000. Traffic and signal, S&W reduction of $11,000, $6,000 for the removal of a maintenance employee, $5,000 reduction on temporary seasonal hiring, $12,500 in OE $2,500 representing course training, and $10,000 reduction in sign supplies. Recycling, I used $131,500 in grant funds that were available. $62,214 is reduction of the purchase of materials and supplies, disposal prices based upon January, February prices, and $75,000 will be used from recycling trust.
From the recycling trust or for the recycling trust?
From the recycling trust.
Okay.
In sanitation, we have a reduction for the replacement of employee. We had a retiree and a new hire was $20,000 less salary than what we had when we initially requested the budget. I'm utilizing $122,000 in grant funds. And then office supplies and safety equipment we're reducing by $6,100. In yard waste, we're using $25,000 of recycling trust and $21,000 reduction for contractual services and reduced purchase of equipment. Property maintenance, reduction for building maintenance, overall $5,000 in sanitation, $4,000 in village hall maintenance. Department of Health, the shared service we have with MAWA will be reflected as an appropriation offset by revenue down at the end of the grant section. Another $19,500 utilized in grants and a general cut of $1,155. Animal control shows $800 in a general cut. Recreation, almost $60,000 to be used from grant funds that are available. Community center, we have reduced office supplies. Parks is down $189,719. Four new employees, 3 full-time and 1 part-time are not being hired. A $5,000 cut in overtime. OE is down $65,365. Reduction of purchase for herbicides and fertilizers, equipment repair, dumping fees and irrigation repairs, fertilizer, acquisition of equipment, Casio shell printing reduction, CDL testing removal, and horticultural supplies reduced. Grade and pool, $4,000 adjustment for salaries for lifeguards, $15,500 reduction, which is made up of $7,000 in beach sand, $2,000 in sodium hypochloride, and $6,500 in equipment. Water pollution control, $55,000 reduction, not hiring a new employee. Landfill disposal, utilizing grant funds of $39,006, and a reduction of disposal fees of $34,000 based upon the January and February fees that have been charged. Building department, we have a change in staff, utilizing grant funds of $24,000, offsets, moves some of the expense out to the grant fund as well. Accumulated leave, the use of a terminal leave trust is needed for $20,000, and a reduction of salary negotiations for $10,000. So that gets me to page 10. And page 10 is where I moved the $58,600 for MAWA Health out of health into appropriation for shared services. And on page 11, these are all the grant amounts that were available to us from unappropriated monies that I utilized against the appropriations.
So if I can just interject at this point, we were unfortunately notified at 5:30 on Friday afternoon this past weekend that 2 of the 3 grants that the Department of Health has been utilizing to run programming post-COVID, in addition to funding 2 staff members that we have here in the health department, that both of those grants were frozen by the federal government effective Friday. So we have been in discussion with the state of New Jersey, who administers these grants once receiving those federal funds, has piggybacked along with other states on filing an injunction to try to prevent the freeze on these particular grants. So we are in limbo to some degree as to what the direction is going to be here. We've already talked about what we would need to do in the event that we needed to reduce staffing because of the absence of the grants. We've started to undertake those conversations the last few days. I'm hoping that we have some better direction before we introduce the budget next Wednesday as to where we'll be with this, but there's no guarantee to that. So there may be some numbers that you see tonight that may change by the 9th, or they may change by May 14th, which is the date we're slated to have the public hearing and final adoption on the budget. But the situation with the health department funding that comes from the federal government is very much fluid at this time.
Keith, I know that there was another grant that would keep those two employees in place for some period of time. We didn't know how long.
So
Have you
we've
figured
done that
out?
calculation, and there's approximately, as it stands today, about $17,000 that can be utilized for salaries. Until that money expires, obviously, we would like to retain those folks here. But, and there's also a civil service aspect to this, which I don't want to get too deep into, just based on the fact that it is a personnel matter. But we are wrestling with the announcement of these two grants being cut and trying to determine what the outcomes are going to look like.
Do we have any idea how long that $17,000 will last?
Later into the spring,
So, month and a half, 2 months,
give or take.
give or take. Okay, thank you.
All right.
So coming down the home stretch, on page 12, there was a reduction for the interest on notes and the payment of bond anticipation notes as a result of the January bond sale we had, so the notes were paid off. And then the last item is $17,949 that's left over from an emergency that we appropriated for last year that was unexpended, had to be included in the budget. And that gets me to the total of the $2,445,834.50.
It's a shame that Evan isn't here tonight. This would have been his favorite budget meeting. He missed all the good cuts.
So, Mayor, let me also say that one of the outstanding issues that we were also wrestling with was the reserve for uncollected taxes. Based on the change over to traditional taxation by Valley Hospital, we needed to submit to the state what our tax collection rate was last year. Gratefully, through the efforts of Bob and others here at the village, they were able to explain to the state of New Jersey, to the Division of Local Government Services, that the village never received traditional tax revenue from the main Valley Hospital campus. Instead, we were collecting a separate tax, not calculated in the property taxes, relative to the amount of beds that they had at the facility. They were paying per bed based on state law that was passed back in 2021. That being said, the state has allowed us to calculate our 3-year average, starting with 2021, so it'll be 21, 22, and 23, as the rate to be applied for tax collection in calculating the reserve for uncollected taxes for this year. So we're not going to see an impact or a significant impact as we might have on the line item for uncollected taxes. And that resolution that was passed last month will be submitted to the state of New Jersey, indicating what that tax collection amount on the 3-year average will be, and that's what will be applied to this year's budget. Bob, I don't know if you have anything else that you want to add on that.
No, you hit everything.
Okay, I try. So that's where we are on that. And I think that about sums it up, and I think Bob is prepared, unless the council has any questions on any of the things we've discussed so far, I think he can summarize where we are from a tax levy standpoint.
So we've maintained our tax levy cap, we've stayed under it. And after taking into consideration all the revenues that are available and the appropriations that we've put in front of you, we've come up with a tax rate increase of 3.14 for 2025.
Questions, comments?
For the public who may be watching or seeing this through the archives, can you explain the cap again? Just the theory of it, why we have a cap and what it is.
So I think you should start with the appropriations cap.
Right.
And then separately speak to the tax levy cap.
So there's two caps that have been with us for quite some time. The first is the appropriation cap. So you have to do a calculation of your appropriations, reduce it by certain items that are required by law, such as debt service, shared services, things of that nature that comes down to a bottom line. Then you take 2% of that in order to determine what your cap max is for the year. You then take that number and add back current debt service, other operations, shared services, the same types of deductions that you had. Then you get a credit for new construction. So you get to take the municipal rate and multiply it by whatever new construction is certified by the tax assessor for the year. And that gives you basically the increase that you're going to work with that you cannot exceed. The second cap that you have is a tax levy cap, and that takes the appropriations from the prior, that takes the amount to be raised by taxation from the prior year, and basically does the same thing, makes adjustments to it that are allowed by law to reflect debt service, increases in healthcare costs, anything that's a movement from one year to the next. Since for 2 years now, we've had substantial increases in healthcare costs. That allows us to raise more money by taxation above the cap to pay for those types of costs. So when you're done, you do the 2% calculation on those aspects, and that gives you the maximum amount of money that you can raise by taxation. Now, in the state's budget, there are calculations that are advertised to the public that shows how we arrive at those numbers, and so everybody's comfortable with the calculations.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And Mayor, the other thing I would like to add, roughly speaking, and we still have to finalize this spreadsheet, and when it's complete, we'll certainly share it with the council. But one of the major talking points at a previous budget meeting was the employee head count. As it stands, in our last calculation, we had 310 employees full-time last year. I'm sorry, full-time and part-time. Total going into 25 would be 314. And that the net 4 would all be backfilling positions in the public safety area that had not been previously filled when people either left or retired.
So the 4 are police and fire.
Yes. And actually, there's more than that because we've reduced all the new positions
Right.
in the civilian areas, but we've maintained trying to achieve getting back the ranks at both fire and PD. So there's more than 4, but the net number is 4, and the 4 above last year would all be tied back to public safety.
And even with those 4, we're still not up to a full contingent of police. Is that accurate?
That's correct.
Okay.
And it's going to take us some time to get as many members through the academy as we can
Yep.
to fill the ranks.
Yep. Questions? No. Comments?
I was wondering, how does our increased burden of pensions from last year, was it last year when it was 23%?
That was healthcare?
Yeah, healthcare. Okay. How is it this year?
I believe the number's 11 or 14%, one or the other.
A
It's
little
less than
better.
it was last year.
Good. Thank you.
So a little more than a third of our budget is healthcare and pensions. Is that accurate? 23 and 11, 34?
Sounds about right.
Okay, just, yeah, rough and dirty. Just good to know, because those are the things that
We can't touch.
we can't touch, we have to work around that. And
No-
whatever,
Nor
and
would
whatever.
we want to. I mean,
Right.
nor would we want to. For
Oh, no, I'm not saying, what I'm saying is that when we craft a budget we only have two-thirds of the budget to work with.
I think it's important to note that the only area that the council has some discretion is operating budgets and salaries and wages, right? And when you have collective bargaining agreements, you try to negotiate the best deal that you can for the employee and for the taxpayer. But then for traditionally a 4-year period, you're bound to that contract. So once that contract is settled, it becomes a fixed cost. The other big ticket items in the budget are fixed. Salary, pension and benefits, both on the healthcare side and on the pension side. Utility costs, we have no control over what PSEG's rates are going to be, what the cost of fuel might be in a given year. We have to take all of those different things into account. But a major part of the budget, and this applies to every municipality, every county in the state, many of the big ticket items are fixed costs that you don't have the ability to cut. So what Bob just went through with you on those 10 pages or so of budget cuts are the areas that we have some level of discretion. And I think what we're most proud of is the fact that we've been able to cut into the budget to get us this number of 3.14, which I think is a manageable increase. Again, when I came here, I talked about, slow and steady wins the race. I'm not a big proponent of zeros in 1 year, because 2 years later, you're going to be dealing with a 6 or 7% increase because you have to make up for the zero that happened 2 years prior. I just don't think that those types of budget gimmicks are the way to go if you're looking for a consistent and steady ability to restrain what the tax increase is going to look like.
No, I personally agree completely that we need to maintain steady budget increases. People ask me all the time, can you make our taxes go down? No, It's impossible. It's absolutely impossible. But when you're talking about an approximately 3% budget increase in a time that number pretty much mirrors inflation, I want to give kudos to the department heads and to the administration, to management, for putting together an incredibly responsible budget that I think touches all the buttons, satisfies all the needs of the residents, doesn't make any cuts that affect services. So, because I know in this community, our services are critical and something that our residents expect, and I'm really happy that we're able to deliver them. So, thank you all for doing a great job on this.
I just wanted to say clearly, for the public watching, for the staff, I'm incredibly thankful. This is a lot of effort. My joke was going to be Pam's the happiest because the page font was so big. And so I wanted to thank everybody. It's true, it got much bigger this year. And I want to remind people that not in the budget are countless hours of volunteer hours, that we get the luxury of having a very deep and wide pool of volunteers who did give countless hours. Not here and reflected are the donations. We are very lucky with our library board. The library is our asset, and they very much offset issues. And to Paul's point, if we ever wanted it to go down, we would have to touch services, and that's not really what Ridgewood wants. And additionally, within this budget is capital necessary to still address the lingering issues. This year, we saw capital support the town garage coming down. Hopefully this coming year, we'll see the capital do things like the West Glen sidewalks and Shedler. So I'm very grateful to everything and to all the unseen, including countless staff hours and childcare and all of that. Driving home late at night, I just am incredibly thankful. It's been, sometimes you feel really lucky to volunteer here.
Anybody else? All good. Take it away, Keith.
I think you have to open it up for public comment.
Let's go. Back to public comment. I see no one in the room. Dylan, do we have anyone on hybrid access? Seeing no one, I'm going to close public comment and entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Let's go home.